and DG Woodlands are very good at this. They go, let's just do it. And then they succumb the hurdles somehow, and I think that's a mentality that we've got to somehow propagate. Andrew, sorry.
So yeah, the biosphere absolutely should be doing that. You know, it's the biggest designation we have in Galloway and Southern Ayrshire, because we're not having a national park now. The biosphere can be delivering that, but it needs the resource, and it needs the engagement with some of those larger actors. So who's the biggest landowner in the biosphere? FLS. Brilliant that they're working on, you know, Kilstewart Forest and engaging with you there. They used to engage with a fantastic catchment-wide project called the Cree Valley Community Woodland Project, which was restoring something called Atlantic rainforest. Buzzword in the northwest of Scotland, kind of forgotten about down here, and even Guy Shrubsholl doesn't mention this area particularly in his book. What happened? They kind of started to withdraw because they were being asked for money to go in all the time. There was a management agreement there on that. And there was a misunderstanding in the management agreement because the board of the community project thought that the management agreement said that some of the income from the commercial activities would go back into the project. It didn't. And they said, no, that was never the intention, which was disappointing. 20 odd years ago, there used to be something called the Environment Panel for the Galloway Forest Park, which was chaired by the Forest District Manager, an incredibly enlightened guy, Rob Souter, who engaged with all sorts of people, community councils, access folk, ENGOs, other public bodies. I mean, I sat on it when I used to work for SNH. It was a genuine look at a strategic approach to managing Galloway Forest Park, with discussions around individual forest district plans within that overall. Who knows where the strategic plan for the Galloway Forest Park is? I haven't a clue, and I still work in the sector. I don't know what the strategic plan is. I don't know where things are going. And every time the organisation I work for, or the biosphere, talk to FLS, it's, oh, well, yeah, we've got to make money. You know, we've the commercial, the production side of the forestry is all important, and, you know, biodiversity and community stuff, it all takes a back seat. So as communities, I think we need to be pushing at that door all the time, and getting our political folk to be, you know, convincing FLS that they really do need to start talking to communities properly and properly engaging with them. So it's a bit of a ramble and a rant, but
very useful. Thank you. And I got 2 messages. Biosphere, yes.
Yes.
So if we come and talk to
and
Biosphere,
I'll tell the board and the trustees.
Right. Okay. In which case we'll pass straight to Mark, who is another trustee, I believe.
Not speaking for the biosphere. I mean, I thought the point had passed, but actually Andrew rounded back to it there. I mean, the thing with the long-term management plans that Julia's mentioned, I think you said, didn't you? They happen on all the forests, and that's private and public. And you might not be able to get an in with a management agreement or an MOU on a private forestry plan, but you certainly still should be able to engage, and they do have to come and talk to the communities about them. But one of the issues we've seen is that communities just do not have the knowledge about how the process works, what their rights are, what they're able to do, even what the scope of their response is allowed to be. There's just nothing, whether it's new woodland creation or long-term management plans. And we've been campaigning for years to try and get that engagement in place via Scottish Forestry. But the conversation earlier made me think maybe we just do the guidance ourselves through some other organisation and stop waiting for it to be handed to us and make that available. Because while the community might not go and look for a website with best practice on, these are landing in your inbox, you know, every week or so, or, you know, however often, they come to your inbox and then you've got no idea how to engage. So if there's some sort of training and some sort of advice available, that a community can pick up when it needs it, when that thing comes past them, because they're not going to go and choose to do it like if it hasn't arrived as an issue for them. They haven't got time. But there should be something there that's available for when these things do come up. And then people would have much more opportunity to know what is possible at those times. And over.
It's activism. I think it's the same for any activism, like, you know, people who are going to Palestine action protests, they get training because they're going to get arrested, they need to know what they're going to be doing. Like, it's the same thing. I think like having training on where to go, who to talk to, what you should say, or, you know, what you can say. Yeah, I think the right thing.
People's Republic of Glencairn.
Isn't that how I've been trying to sell it so far? But
Is that
You heard it here first.
normally where these events end up. I was just going to say it's sort of the same but different. Is that I'm seeing a lot of interest now, I guess, at regional level in place-based working, and everything's got to be place-led and community-led, and the community, it's got to come from the community, and hand the responsibility over to the community. And what I'm saying is, well, that's great, that's lovely. Does it come with the associated resources?
Yeah.
Because what I'm
Yeah.
seeing is an enormous ask of people to do in their free time.
Yeah.
In a way, and because the resources are not coming with them. And to me, that is wildly unfair. And so although it's easy to say, oh, this is excellent that the council or whoever is shifting to, oh, it be community-led or be place-led, you've got to follow the logical thought through to the end point, which is that if we're handing over the responsibilities to the communities, we're also handing over the resources. Because otherwise, it's just too much to ask.
Yeah.
And Kilstewar's very lucky; has obviously got very high capacity volunteers. Glencairn's, we know, has. But there's loads of communities out there where people have not got the time or the knowledge, you know, to do this. And do they get left behind just because they don't have Steve and Morag and Julia living in their community? So that's a danger for me, is that, you know, despite being obviously all up for this devolution of power, it's got to come with resources as well.
And responsibility.
You know, that responsibility has to come with resources. Otherwise, it's just unfair, and then we fail. And then they go, oh, we told you they couldn't do it.
And also, I think there's the point that we didn't know what we wanted when we started, and that idea that a community comes with a formulated plan is a lot. You know, where does that come from?
Yeah.
And I think it was having that support alongside from FLS to give us time and to let us sort of find our own way was quite exceptional. I mean, I do think that is exceptional. I don't think you can institutionalise that. I mean, there's another sort of thought about this whole thing about value and what's valued. And I don't know how you change a value system within a massive, great institution. But it's clear, you know, that other things could be given value if we could give weight to the environmental and social benefits that communities can produce, that could be put alongside as an offer from communities towards these gaps and these lack of resources that FLS is facing. I mean, that's very idealistic, and I feel I am out in the woods just having a nice time compared to you guys who really got your nose to the grindstone. So, but it does feel like a revaluing is really vital. Because if we continue, I mean, there's only one way this is going. So until that work is given, not financial value, we're talking about resources, but actually given weight within how FLS assesses itself and says, oh, you know, well, we can count this, we can count this in.
Yeah.
We can,
Okay, Steve.
I'm going to look to Nikki here, possibly for correction or advice. Social return on investment, is that something that Scotland deals with? Because am I right in thinking that English public bodies have to consider social
value.
Social. So social.
Adding that additional value to contracts or work that's projects that are being delivered. So thinking in a wider scale of just simply what the project needs to deliver, but how can they do additional bits of work that create more value?
And they have a duty to do that.
Yes.
And that
In,
in
well,
England.
in English.
In England, is that also true in Scotland? That's what I was suddenly.
Sounds like community benefits.
Okay.
Community benefits. They public body standards. At least that comes with procurement contracts. That any company that has a public body procurement contract with a public body would have to have a community benefits aspect.
So they have to show the kind of the above and beyond.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is in.
Yeah.
Because again, that's another lever to push, even if people are not.
I'm just going to, just one final one, just before we'll then wrap up. But I've heard several times people talk about individuals. We've had people named. I remember back in the very early days of renewable energy, effectively the way that renewables got off the ground was that the government was writing an Act of Parliament and various bills that came under that to support and subsidise the nuclear energy industry. And they called it the non-fossil fuel obligation. And some renewable, quite close to some of us, campaigners, or they weren't, they were climate activists actually, recognised that that gave an opening for renewable energy. And at the same time, it just so happened that the relevant minister, who was Colin Moynihan, and his key civil servant, I can't remember his name, but he was a really nice guy, were both pro-renewables and literally just wrote a couple of extra clauses into the non-fossil fuel obligation, which enabled renewables to happen in the UK. So I'm actually really interested in this. You've mentioned individuals, Andrew, you've mentioned individuals, and it does seem to me that, and you've mentioned individuals, if you don't get people who are interested in what you're doing, the door is extremely big to push. And so I think identifying doors that you can get your foot in at the very least and starting is something that we need to be thinking about as well as a starting point, because it's all very well being idealistic and saying the community can buy all the land in Dumfries and Galloway and that's the starting point, but we might be waiting more than a couple of months before that becomes a reality. So that was just my comment. I'm just going to now close out. I realise we're rapidly approaching 9 and everybody wants to get home. So I'm just going to quickly, Steve, I'm going to come back to you to start with. I can't actually remember what it was that I was supposed to ask you.
You didn't give me time to talk about my action points.
Well, in which case, here we go. So I'm actually going to do it, first of all, to the panel and then open it up to anybody, is what single action should we take as, let's say, the Glen Kens out of this evening, either that's been said or hasn't been said yet, to actually give this evening a legacy and a direction?
I'd like to, I don't know how to do this, but I would like to explore ways to get farmers, foresters, non-land-based people talking to each other more. No. Say that again. I'd like to explore ways to get farmers, foresters, land managers, various kinds, and the non-land-based community together and talking to each other more on an equal footing, which is a big ask, but I think we need to crack that one.
I'm really interested in that, in the sharing of best practice, but not in a oh, we did this and it was amazing way, in the way that you've done it, Julia, as to this is how we affected this change. You know, so little roadmaps for people and how, you know, and I know we tried it and it didn't work, but it's 2026 now, there's different tools out there. You know, I'd be really interested to explore whether there's a way of sharing best practice, but not in a, yeah, as I said, yeah, not just in a, we did this and now it's awesome, but we did this and this is how we did it. So I think that's brilliant. Sorry, that wasn't your idea.
I guess it's sort of back to the nuts and bolts of that transition and making them much more visible and transparent, if that's possible, and what are the mechanisms to do that. So the things that already exist in policy, and just somehow oxygenating them.
Any from the floor? In addition, yes, Rob.
Yeah, I suppose it's just building on that importance of finding somebody who's interested in what you're doing, who's got an ability to do something. That could be a landowner, or it could be a government official, or it could be somebody else, who can actually help you do that, because that we've seen how important that is. Everything in silos means everybody's responsibility and nobody's accountable for it effectively within government. But quite a lot of people have kind of bits of land which from their point of view are problems because they're difficult to farm, or they can't do something with it because the land's not great and they can't plant trees they like, etc., etc. And that would seem to be some kind of opportunity to have that conversation and say, well, what's your problem? And could we as a community help you solve that problem? The actual solution and how it's funded will very much depend on the political flavour and what's around there, and as some of these projects will take many years, then actually it might be different funding at different times as funding cycles move along. But that would seem to be a practical way. I mean I know that Glen Kent is hugely powerful and influential, but kind of trying to change the whole philosophy about how government works is quite ambitious. And I just wonder if there's a more kind of pragmatic, on the ground sort of basis where find somebody who's got a problem and somebody who might be able to help you solve it, and maybe that can come together and then
No, thank you. Very useful. Any? Jenna? Sorry, Jenna first,
sorry.
and then backwards. You hand up, Roger. Okay.
Just a point on communities and how information is spread. When you take away all the frameworks and the networks and the agencies, information spreads between communities by osmosis, and not locally, not regionally, but across Scotland. The year before last, I went up to Knoydart for no reason other than I'd heard about what they were doing there. How did I hear about that? No idea. Just came into my sphere one day. So communities and community information is incredibly important, is incredibly powerful, and there are networks forming of community councils all across Scotland, and I happen to have the numbers right here, coincidentally. In the Highlands, 50 community councils have come together to have a stronger voice in land use issues. In North East Scotland, 85 community councils have come together. In the south of Scotland, it is 31. Of those, only 9 are D&G. So we need to get active, we need to get into these networks, because that's how we're going to hear about what's going on, that's how we're going to hear about all these brilliant projects that are going on elsewhere in Scotland or in our region or whatever, and that's how we're also going to have a stronger voice, is if we all come together. And training and resources, apparently.
Why has it not happened in D&G like the Highlands?
Well, because I think we're just maybe a little bit slower to hear about it, but there's certainly plenty of communities represented here. So, you know, get your community councils to sign up to this convention. Moniad?
I don't know. Did they? What's the name? What's the name of the network? Do you know?
I think I don't. Well, they emailed all the community councils, so it's actually called the Jedburgh Convention right now. Yeah, Jedburgh. Yeah.
I will, if you don't mind, yeah, that was one community, but my understanding is that there is one email that is a representative email for all community councils across Scotland, and if you post something to that email address, they will circulate it on your behalf, and it could be that things like that with these networks, etc., is a way of sharing and cross-fertilising good practice. Yeah. Okay. So I think that we're only 5 minutes late, which is remarkable for... Oh, Roger! Sorry, we're going to be half hour late. Roger, sorry.
No, we should finish.
No. If everybody's happy, I I've got a couple of things I want to say as well. So.
Okay, we need to go to Edinburgh, and we need to go to the Director General level in the government, because they're the people that should be pulling all the pieces together across the briefs. And we need to go to the Parliament and to demonstrate with other communities around the country, get a reception in the garden room, because they're quite powerful. And remember, we've got more new MSPs than we've had other than at the beginning of the Parliament. The third thing is, and I'm saying this to myself out loud, we ought to be thinking of in the likes of the Royal Society and the Geographical Society what we can be doing to case, and I'll take that back to particular to the RSE, because we're just wondering about how we stimulate these sorts of debates. Last point, and I've been worried for a long time now about the local democratic deficit. And I've been ruminating with old mates who were part of, reforming local government way back in the 70s. What we've ended up with is regional centralisation and central centralisation, and we haven't got any devolution. Helen, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's really important. The politicos don't want to talk about this because the community councils don't have the responsibilities, the roles, or the resources. They don't have the 3 R's that would make them work. And yet we need to have that sort of thing now if we're going to resolve that democratic deficit. And I think we need to start lobbying nationally about that.
Brilliant. Yeah, very nice. Thank you very much. So I've got a whole page of things just to wrap up, to take away from this evening. It's been fantastic from my perspective. One thing I should perhaps say is that I have been working as part of my land use project. I'm actually currently producing a call to action that is going to go to every new MSP that is coming into the Scottish Parliament on the 7th of May. And this is just a small contribution that I can make. I went out and a series of questionnaires asking people what is the vision for the future. Those responsive have come back, and I'm asking an MSP to champion a cause in the next Parliament. So, and that's everything from, they're achievable things that should be a cross-party consensus, everybody can sign up to, based on what the public has said. So that will be going out. This evening, what I will do is add some of the thinking that has come out of this evening into the covering letter that goes with that call to action. I think it's been hugely useful for me in producing that. You can see the questions on that I've been asking at the beginning of the exhibition, and the post-it notes of some of the ideas that have been coming back, but it's been a much wider questionnaire than that. I am also working with, and I don't know whether they'll be back in, but Emma Harper and Finlay Carson, that if they get back in, they will sponsor exactly the sort of evening or event that Roger's mentioned going up to the Scottish Parliament and Holyrood. And if we are successful, we're actually preparing it before the 7th, so if either of them get in, it will be submitted straight away, so we get to the front of the queue of trying to get, it won't take a year and a half to get in there to have our event. So I will be doing that in literally preparing that next week to be submitted after the 7th with whichever one of those two gets in. They're happy to help sponsor that. And then we can take some of the things that we've got here, and perhaps I can send out an invite to see who's interested in in being part of developing some of the thinking that comes into this in different ways. So I'll try and draw together some of this thinking in light of that. Yeah, so that's just little things that I'm doing, and from my perspective, yeah, no, I'll leave it there. Yes, in which case, unless anybody has anything else that they wish to say, I think first of all, can we have a big thank you to the back of the room and to CatStrand as ever for being so totally brilliant. Thank you to our 3 panel speakers for being as brilliant, and actually thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure listening and having a conversation with you all. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you.